So you want to build a Force user in Fantasy Flight Star Wars RPG? Well, you've come to the right place. So because the default setting for this game is between the two Death Star explosions in the original trilogy, there's not a lot of Jedi or Force users in general running around. And learning the Force is just not that easy, so they've made it kind of a slow and arduous process. This game includes both Force powers and lightsaber forms that your character can learn and master, but to do so, your character has to be Force sensitive, have a Force rating of at least 1. You can raise your Force rating as the game goes on, but at the start, it'll just be a 1. Technically, you could raise it up to, in the teens, I think. I never actually counted. But for the most part, 3 to 5-ish tends to be a good range for a late-stage Force user. But your mileage may vary. Anyway, there are 2 basic ways to become Force sensitive. One way to become Force sensitive is by taking the Luke Skywalker route, or Leia, if you include the expanded universe, or Rey for you young people. You start with one of the 12 non-Force sensitive careers from either the Edge of the Empire or Age of Rebellion core books. So you could be a smuggler, let's say piloting specialization as your first specialization, and anytime after that you can spend experience points on what's called a Force sensitive universal specialization. Now a universal specialization is a specialization that's not attached to any career in the game. Because it's not attached, you can't pick it as your first specialization, it has to be a second or third or whatever. But that also means there is no 10-point penalty for purchasing it. So if you're a smuggler pilot, well, you could buy the Force-sensitive Jedi Exile for 20 points, because it's your second specialization. Now, there are 3 universal specializations in the game. 1, the Jedi Exile from Edge of the Empire, and 2 from Age of Rebellion, the Force Emergent and the Rebel Recruit. The Rebel Recruit isn't Force-sensitive at all, so we're not going to talk about it today. But the Jedi Exile and the Force Emergent each will give you a Force rating of 1. But this is in exchange for getting no additional career skills. And again, it gives you a Force rating of 1. It doesn't give you +1 Force rating. So if you buy the Jedi Exile and the Force Emergent, you'll have 2 talent trees to play with, sure, and that's great. Well, 2 extra talent trees to play with, but you're only going to have a Force rating of 1. It's not going to increase that way. You can increase it, just not like this. Now you'll notice some of the talents in the tree have this little symbol in the corner. This means it's a Force talent, and you need to be Force sensitive in order to get the benefits of it. That clarification doesn't make much sense now, because if you buy a Force sensitive specialization, obviously you are Force sensitive. This will make more sense in a minute. Most of these Force talents will simply add a boost die or even a force die to certain rolls or checks, representing a lot of the basic enhancements to your reflexes and senses. The other way to become Force sensitive, the much easier way, is to simply start off with one of the 6 Force sensitive careers from the Force and Destiny core book. Just like any other career in the game, they each have 3 starting specializations, in the core book at least, and of course they have their own career source books. One of the biggest differences, however, is the fact that they don't get 8 core career skills. Like when you pick a smuggler, just by being a smuggler, no matter what kind of specialization you have, you at the very least get 8 career skills. Now the reason you only get 6 instead of 8 is because your character also gets a Force rating of 1, meaning they rely more on the Force than their skills, whether your character realizes it or not. So to clarify and summarize, there are 8 decisions you could possibly make that will make your character Force sensitive. Picking one of the 6 Force sensitive careers from Force and Destiny, and remember, you can never change your career, once a smuggler, always a smuggler, or at some point you can buy one of the 2 Force-sensitive universal specializations. And any of these 8 different routes will merely give you a Force rating of 1. It won't increase your Force rating at all, so keep that in mind. Now, the benefit of going the Force and Destiny career route is that it's quicker, and could potentially be a bit cheaper, although not necessarily, because half of your core career skills get a free rank. 4 with Edge and Age careers, but only 3 with Force and Destiny careers. So that could make up the point cost, depending on how you want to build your character, but typically this is a bit cheaper, and it's definitely a bit quicker, if that's how you want your character to be. Really, I would only suggest the universal specialization route to get your Force sensitivity, only if it's by accident. You started making a bounty hunter, I don't want to be a Force user, that's stupid. And then 6 months into the campaign, all of those people are doing powers and swinging lightsabers, and I want to do that. Sure, he's Force sensitive. Give me that spec. In that situation, I would recommend it, but if you know you want to build a Force user anyway, even if they discover it later in the campaign, you're probably better off just picking one of the Force and Destiny careers from the get-go. But as always, check the talents and career skills that career and specialization choice will give you, and make sure that it helps bring the character you want to create to life. That's all that really matters. So you've built your character, and at some point you've gained Force sensitivity. Now what? Well, let's take a look at the Force powers. Each Force power works kind of like the signature abilities from the career source books, or rather, the signature abilities from the career source books works like the Force powers. Force powers technically came first. Each Force power is its own talent tree, where it has some basic requirements, in this case having a particular Force rating, usually anywhere from 1 to 3, and there's a top talent within that tree that you purchase, and now you have the basic iteration of that power. So let's say you buy a Force power like Move. First of all, it requires a Force rating of 1, though some powers might require 2 or even 3, and then as long as you have that and you have the points, you can buy the base ability for only 10 points, some powers a little less, some a little more. 10 or 15 seems to be the most common. And the base power allows you to move a thing of a certain size up to a certain distance. And many of these different factors will increase as you buy talents. There are also talents that will give you a new use of that power. For example, throwing objects or people as an attack. And every power or facet of a power is activated in different ways, works differently. You know, sometimes you might have to set aside a Force die to maintain an ongoing effect. One of the more common ways you activate a power is simply by rolling a Force die, generating Force points. There are light side points and dark side points, and if you roll the one that fit in with your alignment, you generate Force points, and that means they can be spent to activate certain aspects of your ability. So you might need some amount of Force points, at least one, maybe more, I won't say, you'll have to find out for yourself, in order to move something in the first place, but only of that certain size. Now, if you have the talent that allows you to lift something heavier, you can do that, but it may require you to generate more Force points on your roll. So as you get a higher Force rating, you'll have more Force die to work with, and you can roll more Force die at a time when it's allowed, which means you're more likely to be successful when using your Force powers. In some cases, like I said, not all Force powers work exactly alike. You'll have to take them on a case-by-case basis. So there are 8 powers in the Force and Destiny core book, so obviously probably a best place to start if you're building a Force character. Now, both the Edge of the Empire and Age of Rebellion core books have powers, 3 each, but the same powers are also found in the Force and Destiny core book. So if you already have the F&D core book, buying one of the other core books isn't going to bring anything new to the table power-wise. If you want more Force powers, each of the Force and Destiny career source books will have one. Alright, let's talk about lightsaber forms. This is my favorite part in the entire Force and Destiny core book. There are these multiple forms. I think there's technically 7. There's 6 main ones, and they're each a different fighting style with its own history and how it was developed, and specializes in a different type of combat. Like, she chose the most basic lightsaber form. It was the first one created, and it specializes in taking on multiple opponents at once. However, because it was invented before blasters were, there really isn't all that much defense against ranged attacks. So that's one of the downsides. And if we look at the She Cho talent tree, that's right, 6 lightsaber forms get their own talent tree. The talents deal with taking on multiple opponents at once, but has very little defense. In fact, probably no range defense. I don't see any. Anyway, I'll do a more intricate breakdown of all the specs in future videos, but for now, the awesome thing to take away is every single career in the Force and Destiny book, all 6 careers, each have their own lightsaber form, an entire talent tree and specialization dedicated to that form. And all the talents really bring that form to life in all the ways that a fan would expect. And you'll have all those talents which make you more combat effective. You'll also get lightsaber as a career skill. Even if you're playing, let's say, a consular healer, the ultimate pacifist, you could then just sidestep on over to Niman Disciple and get pretty good with the lightsaber. And the reason you can get pretty good with the lightsaber is not just all the talents they have, it's not just the fact that you get lightsaber as a career skill, but also the big one, the technique talent. By default, the lightsaber skill is based off of brawn, but 5 of the 6 lightsaber form specializations will have a technique in the second row that you can purchase, and it will allow your lightsaber checks to be based off of a different characteristic. So even the wussiest Jedi librarian can whip out that lightsaber and not make a giant ass of themselves. In every set of books, Edge of the Empire, Age of Rebellion, and Force of Destiny, they have this optional group rule that you have to pick one of them, or in some cases, a combination of the two. You got obligation and duty in Age of Rebellion. Here you got morality. And there are options you can take which will give you bonuses in your character creation, you know, more money or more points or a little of both. But in Force and Destiny, the morality system also introduces the ability to start as a particular morality. And there's a point system. You can get more points or less points, which will make you light side or dark side. And as you cross one of those 2 thresholds, you'll get certain bonuses to your character. And as you get even more light side or dark side, you'll get even more bonuses. So you pick or roll for an emotional strength, like bravery. Your character's really brave, but that comes with an emotional weakness, like anger, or love and jealousy, curiosity and obsession. You know, you could be curious about learning the mysteries of the Force, but obviously that can be taken too far, and you could delve too much into the dark side. You know, what are you willing to sacrifice to increase your power? Stuff like this is a nice guide for players, but I think we should be careful not to think of it as too restricting. You know, if I'm gonna do things in the story that manipulates a player and puts them in these tough situations to make choices, or I'm just trying to create cool story moments, I rather look to choices he made and how he interacts with certain characters, certain people he likes and dislikes, how he acted in certain situations. I'd rather look at that than look at a thing he wrote on his character sheet, you know? And sometimes you have this idea of how your character is going to be, and then you realize just by playing the game and being that character that your character is something different than what you wrote, which is merely a representation of how you envisioned your character to be, and not what your character actually is right now. Not the biggest fan, but it is necessary to really work with your powers. The morality system and the force powers are too well intertwined to not use it a little bit. But anyway, it's not that big of a deal.